With North Carolina's football season just around the corner, it's time to take a look ahead at the 2023 Tar Heels. This is TarHeelIllustrated.com. Welcome aboard for today's show. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones. He is THI staff writer and football analyst Brandon Peay. And Brandon, we launched today a series of podcasts where we're going to take a look at each position group of the Tar Heels as we build up toward the start of fall camp. It's the middle of July right now, so we're going to rush these pods in. Fall camp begins August 2nd. The players report August 1st, first practice August 2nd. I believe that practice is closed, but second practice is open. We will be there every time there's availability, either to watch practice or do interviews afterward. Of course, THI will be there because we go everywhere the Tar Heels go in football and basketball. And I want to remind you, you don't know, or even if you do know and you've been thinking about it, guys, it's just $8.33 a month for an annual subscription to Tar Heel Illustrated. Same price it's been since I started when I took over this site August 1st, 2014. It's 9 years ago. Nothing else has changed prices, or everything else has changed prices. We haven't. We're the same price. And what do? You get inside information with our content, premium content, tons of unmatched perspective. You get football recruiting stuff, basketball recruiting stuff. But you know what the sneaky best part of our site is? It's our community. We have an awesome community. It's a community of passionate Carolina fans like you guys. It's a respectful community. It's a very knowledgeable community. A lot of people tell me that are on our site, that are on a bunch of other communities, say it's their favorite one because the discourse is so good. So if you want to be involved in something like that, be around of other like-minded, passionate Carolina fans like yourself, it's just $8.33 a month. Plus you get everything else that we do. And we are unmatched when it comes to David Sisk and his basketball analysis and recruiting, and Dina and Lee Wardlaw. We have a second football recruiting guy now. So you guys got to come on board. Football season's coming. You have a Heisman candidate. You can have a very good team. You got all kinds of stuff going on with basketball. We have been crushing it with inside intel. We've been crushing it on the boards. You got to hop on board. Brandon's laughing because he knows it, because he can't even keep up sometimes. Right, yeah. Brandon?
It's hard. It's hard out there. A lot of stuff going on, but Tar Heel Illustrated as a whole, we are keeping up.
Absolutely. And the first thing we're going to talk about here as we launch into the preview of the football season is quarterback. Some people might say, oh, that's an easy podcast. I don't need to pay attention. They're just going to talk about how great Drake is. Yeah, we're going to talk about how great Drake Maye is because he's a phenomenal quarterback. But we're going to get in a little bit about his game, what he's been working on, some of the stuff that he has made a point of emphasis to get better, and how maybe things are a little bit different at quarterback for him and Chip Lindsey's offense as opposed to Phil Longo's offense. And guess what? What happens if Drake gets hurt? You got Connor Harrell, you got Ted Hudson, you got Jefferson Boaz over there, has been in the program for a while. So we're going to get into all that here in this discussion. So Brandon, let me ask you, when you think of the quarterback position at Carolina, obviously you think of Drake Maye. What's the first thing that comes to mind when somebody asks you about Drake Maye, the quarterback?
Honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about Drake Maye is how lucky UNC is as a program to go from one guy in Sam Howell to come in and be your best quarterback in school history and then have another guy right behind him surpass him. I just don't think that doesn't happen very often, like historically. I just think people that are fans of UNC should really appreciate like what's going on with the program and how they're producing quarterbacks and homegrown quarterbacks at that. So I think that's a really good thing. And so like for the past 4 years, UNC quarterback has been good. They've been great. And I think Drake Maye is just another addition to that. He's going to be another great quarterback. And I'm more interested to see what happens after Drake Maye leaves, because, you know, they did it once with Sam Howell, going from Sam Howell to Drake Maye. Can they do it again, going from Drake Maye to whoever is the next quarterback? But when I do think about Drake Maye, I think about an accurate passer, think about a guy with big stature, you know, developed guy, athletic guy, future first-round draft pick, and just a guy that a generational talent. That's what I think about with Drake Maye. And I think having Drake Maye at quarterback kind of puts UNC under a lot of pressure because you don't get these generational quarterbacks too often, and you have to make something happen while he's in a UNC uniform.
I agree. And I think I think he's going to be judged ultimately, and this isn't so much a discussion about how he's going to be judged, but we'll go there right now. He's going to be judged by what the team does.
Yeah,
it's fascinating to see how people went from being gaga about Sam Howell to dump it on him because the team went 6-7.
Yeah,
and I think they had a flawed offensive approach from the outset. When he's running for all those yards against Georgia State, I think you may have been sitting next to me. I'm like, this is not good. This isn't the right way to approach being successful, and it never really gained traction that season. I think it's going to be different now, in part because there's a new offensive coordinator. I think it's going to be different now because Chip Lindsey doesn't want Drake Maye taking so many hits. He took a lot of hits last year. He had a lot of those RPOs that sometimes maybe he made some mistakes when he ran, when he maybe should have. I don't think they're going to run as many RPOs this year. There's also going to be more screens to running backs, going to throw more to the backs. And they believe there'll be less sacks. Now, I guess they cut their sack total last year down by 9 from 49 to 40, but 40 is still a crap load of sacks. So they need to protect him more, don't have him run the ball as much, minimize the hits. And then you obviously minimize the possibility that he could get hurt. And we'll talk about the backup situation here in just a minute. But I do think they have a different approach enough that this isn't going to be a repeat of 2021 when Sam still had a really good statistical year, but it just never worked that year. They never gained traction. I think it's going to be different this year because of Chip Lindsey's approach. And I also think Drake's just a better player than Sam. He can make things happen when they break down better because he could see more. Sam's issue was he didn't always see stuff because he was 6 feet tall. Drake is a legitimate 6'5". He's a better athlete. He throws rolling better than Sam did. He's less apt to tuck and run as Sam was his junior year. So I think because of those reasons, he will have a better year. So let me ask you, what does a better year mean for Drake? Last year, he was at 66.2%, 4,321 yards, 38 TDs, 7 interceptions. He wasn't as great the last 4 games as he was up to that point. I'll give you guys a reason why I think that was the case here in a minute, but I'll ask you the question. What does being better mean this year for Drake as opposed to last year?
So you kind of answered the question. Is I think being better is being consistently great throughout the season. I mean, it's kind of hard if you just see the first half of the season versus the second half of the season. I think 6 of the first 8 games of the season, he was in the 70 percentile of completion percentage. And then if you look at the last 5 games, I believe it is, he didn't reach 70% at all. I believe 63%. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I believe 63% is his highest in the last 5 games, was his highest completion percentage. And UNC went 1-4 in those games. So I think being better is towards the end of the year when everybody's seen you on film, everybody knows what you're going to do. Can you still produce at a high level? I think that's what being better is. And you mentioned Chip Lindsey, and the program has mentioned I know this isn't about the running backs, but the program has mentioned their dedication to running the ball more. Yeah. I think that will definitely help him stay in that 70th percentile the entire season, because when you become one-dimensional, in my opinion, this is just when you become one-dimensional, I think it's better to become a one-dimensional running team because the element of surprise is still there. Like when Georgia Tech used to run the triple option, they would run, then they would just hit you over the top one time with a deep ball. But when you become one-dimensional throwing the ball, there's very little you can do to surprise the defense. So I think that becoming balanced as a whole offense will help Drake Maye become better as a quarterback.
I agree with you, and there's a couple of things I want to hit on. One of the things I like about fewer RPOs is the better run blocking. If you're running an RPO and off the ball, you have to be careful as an offensive lineman how you explode off the ball if it turns out to be a pass. Yeah, and you're not sure what the quarterback's going to do. So I think when you're just going to line up and you're going to man up, you're going to be a little bit more explosive off the snap because you're running that thing off tackle. I think it helps everybody. It allows the play action fake to come into play as well because I think Randy Clements, when you go back to the stuff he did at Baylor when he was their offensive line coach, RG3 was a great talent, but Drake's a great talent too. They were able to run a lot with him, but they threw a ton. He won a Heisman Trophy because he threw the ball more than because he ran the ball. I think that some of that stuff will play into Drake's favor as well. Another thing that you mentioned about Drake that I find very interesting is the percentages of the last 5 games. The first of those 5 games, which was the Wake Forest game, maybe I'll go back and look if I have time in the next couple of weeks. A lot of those incompletes were throwaways.
Yeah.
Because Wake actually covered very well in the second half of that game. A lot of the scoring in that game, there wasn't much scoring, I believe, in the fourth quarter. There were some field goals and stuff. Yeah. And Wake covered, so he threw the ball away a lot. I'm looking at the last 4. The last 4 was different. And I'm telling you, I don't make excuses for anybody because I have no dog in the fight here at all, okay? But I know very well sourced that there are people very close situation that believe that one of the issues was after they beat Wake, the team kind of took their foot off the pedal a little bit because they clinched the Coastal. They were 9-1. Suddenly, Drake is really in serious contention or discussion about the Heisman Trophy. And the offensive coordinator, whom I have a tremendous amount of respect for, I like Phil Longo. I think he's a good guy. I think he did a hell of a job at North Carolina. But his buddy, Luke Fickell, he knew he was going to take a job. And he knew that he was going to go with him. That was something that they had discussed. So the belief is that he may have pulled back some because he was focusing on other things, and that affected them moving forward, and it affected the offense. Now, I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying that's what I've been told by people very close to the situation, that they believe that's part of what happened. Also, I think Drake made some bad reads. I also think that they became so reliant on Josh Downs that they became easy to cover. And that's kind of what happened late. So now I think that's going to be different. We're going to address the wide receivers coming up in a pod here in a bit. You guys will see it in a couple of days. I think that they have a more spreadable wide receiver room now than what they had before, if that makes any sense. I think they have 5 guys that can catch 40 balls or more. I really do. And that doesn't include Andre Green, whom I think could be a guy that erupts at some point and becomes one of those guys as well. They also have 3 tight ends that can catch the ball, turn their nose upfield, and score. Yep. They have running backs they're going to throw to. They have a lot of options. They have a lot of different people for Drake to find and throw to. And because of that, I think he's going to have a better year this year than he had last year. I do think he's going to be in the running for the Heisman, provided that Carolina wins 10 games. If they don't win 10 games, he stands no chance.
I think
North Carolina.
I think in those first 6 games, or the first
4.
Yeah, those first games that we were talking about last season, where Drake Maye was in the 7, he was completing 70% of his passes at least in each game. You got to remember, Josh Downs was injured. I think Josh Downs was injured for a portion during that section, so he was spreading the ball around a lot. And then towards the end of the season, as Josh Downs got more comfortable, you saw him kind of lock in more. He could start getting more targets to Josh Downs, and then the performance just started dropping.
Yeah, if you were to go back and watch the receipt, just watch the coverage. If you could take a long view of the whole field and watch the coverage, it was just different. It was a little bit more stagnant. They weren't as quick. They weren't as darting. Phil Longo's air raid offense is for the receivers to find grass. They weren't finding grass as much.
Yeah.
So. Okay, let's talk about backups. What happens if something happens to Drake? Let's say he gets popped at some point up at Pittsburgh, game 4, second quarter, he gets popped, he has to come out. Who goes in, Connor Harrell or Tad Hudson?
Well, I think you got to give the nod to Connor Harrell at this point. I think I'm still really high on Connor Harrell. I just think when you're trying to evaluate quarterbacks, like the in between the ears is the most important thing, and I just think he has that. And he obviously has the physical talent, or he wouldn't be at a school like Carolina. I just think the mental side of the game is what separates quarterbacks at this level, because everybody has the physical talent. And I know a lot of people were down on him after the spring game, but in my opinion, I just don't think he was protected well. And I just think for the situations he was put in during the spring game, which were, from my viewpoint, was mostly running for his life, he made the right decision, which was throw the ball away, because there was no options for him going down the field. I was on the field taking pictures during that, and you can just see, looking down my camera angle, there's like nothing for him to throw it to. I think he makes good decisions. I think if he ever gets an opportunity to be with the first team offense, I think he'll be all right.
You saw the same thing we did from the press box.
Okay.
But I had the fortune of being in some practices as well, and in speaking with Mac's public comments about Connor, I think consistency was the issue. There were times I saw him in practice where he looked really good. Sometimes I saw him in practice where he looked like he was an early enrollee. And that was sort of the deal on him. They said he had a really good spring last year, so-so in fall camp, and was really inconsistent during the season in his work. And he wasn't preparing to get into games so much because he was the third guy behind Jacoby Criswell. But he still had to have the game plan. He still had to get his reps. And he was really good maybe one week and wasn't very good the next week. So consistency is everything with a quarterback. Just like a pitcher. A pitcher could be really good for 4 innings, and in the 5th inning, you give up a crooked number. That's not good. A quarterback can be really good for 3 quarters, and you throw a pick 6 and a couple of bad passes, and you screw the game for your team. He needs to be more consistent. This August is going to be huge for him. If you talk to people inside the program, they say that the 28 days that they practice or whatever it was, I guess it's still 28 practices you're allowed in the preseason, that he has are going to be enormous for him because the staff needs to have some kind of degree of confidence in who they're going to put in there in case something happens to Drake. Now, I will say this. The read on Tad Hudson in the spring is that he was better than they thought he would be that early, but he's still a ways away. Not a great athlete, still a ways away. And then he had a couple of practices that maybe weren't so great that showed that he was still an early enrollee. I don't think they're in as good a shape right now if something happens to Drake as they would have been last year with Criswell if something happened to Drake. I don't think Connor Harrell is there yet. And I think that that's a concern. That's another reason why the Chip Lindsey offensive approach makes a little bit more sense by not running Drake as much, by throwing more screens to the backs. But one thing they have implemented, Brandon, is there's a little bit more drop step in some of the passes, which means there's a little bit more of a read, which means the offensive line has to hold its block a tad bit longer. That has been an issue. If he's getting sacked a lot, if South Carolina gets to him in the first quarter and they get to him in the second quarter and they get to him in the third quarter, and that becomes an issue, that could be a problem for North Carolina. They must protect up front because everything else, I think, is geared towards Drake's strengths, and they cannot afford for him to get hurt.
Yeah, they have. I mean, we were talking about the options around him earlier. The running backs are pretty much the same. The receivers are, a lot of them are the same. They got, obviously, we'll talk about that later. Tight ends are the same. Offensive line is a lot of the same. So if these guys can just improve, a year, guys get better. So it's just going to be a better core around Drake Maye, and I just think that's going to be good for the Tar Heels overall.
So what's your projection for him for the season? I'm not a big fan of the low-hanging fruit. Is he going to win the Heisman Trophy or not? I'm not a big fan of stuff like that, as you know, but people want to know those things. They want to know what our take is. Do you think that he has a legitimate shot? And I will add the caveat to that is the team has to have a really good season for him to be in contention.
I think he's in the best position as any player in a long time to do. I mean, Sam Howell was in a pretty good position, just didn't live up. I think he's in a better position because he has a better team around him. And I think if you think about Sam Howell's second year under center at Carolina, was kind of his breakout year at Carolina. So maybe this is Drake Maye's second year leading the team. So maybe he can have even more of a breakout year than he had last year. If that happens, I thought he should be in New York last season, but if that happens this season and they can win, I would say if they can get 9-10 wins, he has to end up in New York. And I think that's good for the program overall if they can get a player in New York.
I agree. And I agree about what you just said about the team. The team got complacent after the Orange Bowl. They didn't have the right chip and edge in that offseason, and Mac knew it. He's talked a lot about it. This club has a chip. This club has an edge. This club has made enough changes with staff and by bringing in the analysts. Clyde Christensen, who, by the way, will help Drake unbelievably. He was coaching Tom Brady this time a year ago. I think that lays the foundation for a better team mindset heading into the season, which means they'll handle a setback better. That club in Sam's third year, their season was derailed by the middle of the second quarter of the opener at Virginia Tech. They never recovered. and won some games, but they just never found themselves. I think this club is going to be better positioned to, if something goes wrong early, they can still find themselves and they can still achieve their goals, which means Drake has a chance to do something that North Carolina has never had a guy do. And I agree with you also. I think that he's probably in the best position to make a push as any UNC player since Choo Choo Justice going into his last year. That was right after World War II. So it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add about the QB situation?
I think Drake Maye is going to be. I think Drake Maye is going to have an outstanding year. I think he's going to be. I think he should be number one over. He's going to be the number one overall pick.
I think so too.
I think he's going to be I think it's going to be a good season for the quarterbacks at UNC.
Yeah, he's got the it factor just pouring off of him. So.
I told you this. I think I told you this probably a year ago, before he even started a game. If football had the same developmental program as baseball had, Drake Maye would never be a college player. He would go to he'd go to some single A team, work his way up to the NFL eventually. But
yeah, he would have been in a major league
special
19 or 20, like Jackson Holiday of my Orioles.
Yeah,
he's 19, the number one prospect in baseball. So yeah, I think Drake would have been one of those guys that could have been in the major leagues like at 19. Like that's the comparison. I agree with you. He's Brandon. I'm AJ. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks.